We're learning the fourth Sikha in Parshas Lecha and Chelek Tezvav on page 93. This Sikha here is a Sikha that's primarily based around the Gemara that speaks about the purpose of creation of man. Adam la'amol yulad. Man is created to toil. And for the most part, it's from a Fabrengen, Yudal Nissen Tavshin Lamed Beis, where the Rebbe spoke about this subject at great length. And you can take a look at there in the Sichos at the Fabrengen. It's much more expounded upon than what we have here in the Sikha. And it's also connected, as we'll see, to a pasuk in this week's parsha, what Avram Avinu says in this week's parsha. The shir today is being learned to Nishmas Rabbi Yosef ben Yamin ben Rabbi Menashe Koltman. In Shayches zu der Avtoche von Eibishten zu Avramen, Lizaracha etein es ha'aretz hazais. Hashem promises Avram Avinu, I will give this land to your descendants. Zogt in Medrash, the Medrash says, B'shah shahoy Avram is halach b'Aram Narayim, when Avram walked around where he was living in Aram Narayim, outside Eretz Yisrael. Ra isam oichlin v'shoisim v'poichazim. He saw the people eating and drinking and acting wild. Omar, he said, Halavai lo yehi li chelek b'aretz hazos. I wish that I have no portion in this land. Didn't want to live among such kind of people. When he came to Eretz Yisrael, an area that's called Sulama Shel Tzur because it's a steep hilltop that you have to climb up with a ladder. He saw people working in the field, weeding the field, and doing productive things. Amar Avram said, I wish that my portion should be here amongst these people in this land. Amalei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Eibusha says to Avram, Lezaracha etein es ha'aretz hazos. For your descendants I will give this land. Now, so the Rebbe says, what do we see here in this Medrash? Vibalt, the Medrash verbindt dem Eibushen Zavtoche. We see here the Medrash connects Hashem's promise, Lezaracha etein es ha'aretz hazos, to give this land to Avram's descendants, mit dem, was der Ratzon von Avram Avinu. With this, that what was Avram Avinu's wish? Halavai yechelki b'aretz hazos, that he wishes to be here with these people in this land. Is given to live there is askus b'malacha from the Yeshvi Yaretz. It's because he saw people in this land are occupied with work in the field. Is the fun verstandig? So we understand over here from this medrash as the milo from Zeir is askus b'malacha. This advantage Avram saw of these people being occupied with work is given the sibbe. This is the reason nit not Avram's ratzon to them land. Not only for Avram's desire to live here amongst these people in this place, this is also the reason why Hashem promises Yidden to have this portion, Eretz Yisrael, as the land of Avram Avinu's descendants. Stellt sich the Shaila, but the question on this is, what's the connection of the nature of what people are doing then in the time of Avram to the Zaracha, the descendants later? Das, was Avram Avinu had gesagt, Halavai yehi chelki b'aretz hazos, that I wish that my portion should be here in this land. Hat das euch dem Firish, so what this means as well is, soll haben dort a chelek zwischen the andere Tishavim, that he's going to get one portion amongst the other people living there, weil the Yeshvi Yaretz zan is a chaysik b'malacha, because people here are working. So let's move on, this is something we can understand. Avram hat gewollt weinen zwischen Menschen, was fühlen sich ban hagaruya. Avram Avinu wants to live in good company. He wants to live with people that are acting and behaving normally, properly. Und nicht zwischen azelacha was eicheln v'sheisim v'peichsim, and not amongst people that are eating, drinking, and just being wild. So now we understand why this was Avram's desire. Aber, however, the avtoch lezaracha etin es ha'aretz hazos. When Hashem promises that I will give this land to your descendants, meint doch, as ha'aretz hazos wird der Eibishter im Ganzen weggeben zu Yidden allein. That means Hashem is going to give this entire land to the Yidden alone. Durch Yerusha und Zeh Kibush, they'll have this as an inheritance, and they'll conquer it. If so, the question is me'eze tam soll die Avtoche sein verbunden mit der Anhage Teuve von der Yeshvi Yaretz? Why should this be connected to the good behavior of those people that are living here in this land? Yidden are not going to be living amongst the other people together with them. They're going to be conquering and inheriting this entire territory without anyone else there. Furthermore, the question is, the behavior of people then in the time of Avram's lifetime. which is not relevant many, many years later when Yidden came to conquer Eretz Yisrael. So why is that what happened when Avram saw in his lifetime relevant to the Haftacha for Yidden, for the descendants many years later when they are conquering the entire territory for themselves? So seemingly this question could be answered as the Anhage von the Yoshvi Aretz, the behavior of people living in a certain land, weist of the Tchune Uzgule von der Eretz Azay's Gufe. This actually is an indication of the nature of the very land itself. There's the famous Maimon Chazal, the story of the Meraglim, that says that when you see people living in a certain land with a certain behavior, it doesn't only tell you something about the people, but it also tells you about the nature of this land. A certain land produces refined people, other lands produce vulgar people, and so on. So over here, Avraham Avinu sees the way people are behaving in a specific place. This gives him an indication about the land itself. So that explains why this is a reason also for the promise of Hashem for Avraham Avinu's descendants, that Eretz Yisrael, the land, is a good place. However, the question is, Chazal Zogen. The Medrash tells us, as Maseim Shal Kananiyim Ukulkolim Mikol Amim, that the actions, the behavior of the Canaanim that lived in Eretz Yisrael was the most inappropriate and the lowest level more than all other nations. And that area specifically in Eretz Yisrael where Yidden come to conquer their territory, the Canaanim, well, there's another girsa here instead of Niskavnu, Nisyashvu. There where Yidden are settling in Eretz Yisrael, that was where the worst elements of the Goyim, of the Canaanim lived. With their behavior was worse than anybody else from all other nations. If so, wie bald as Bachlal sind die meisten von den Canaanim gewen mit Kulkolam, mit Kolamim. So we understand that the actions, the behavior of the Canaanim was worse than all other nations. Oich funim am in Aram Naraim, including this nation, the people in Aram Naraim that Avram Avinu saw, Oichlim, Shaisim, Peichazim. Tavi Shaykh zu sagen, if so, how can we say, as ot die einzige Meile von es Askas b'melacha von the Yoshvi Aretz, that this one advantage that the people, the Canaanim living in Eretz Yisrael have, that they are busy with work, und the Gmasa, the einzige Tchune Teuve in im Aretz Gufa, and from this we understand also that this is the one good character that there is regarding the land, that it produces such kind of people that are not going to sit around and do nothing or just behave wildly, but work. This should outweigh alle andere Chesronis, all other deficiencies, all other issues that there is with these people. Biz asliv dem is dafke zi an art versus roy for Yidden. And because of this is the land that's befitting for Yidden to inherit. What is so significant about Melacha, the fact that you have people that keep themselves busy with labor, with work, that this is the land that Avraham Avinu wants his children to live in? Everything besides Melacha, the Canaanim living here were Mekulkolim. They were on the lowest level. So there must be something that's very unique about the work, the Eisei b'Melacha, which is the cause for Avraham Avinu to desire this land, not just for himself, but Hashem promises it for his descendants. So to explain this, the Rebbe is going to give a lengthy introduction and an explanation, beautiful, fascinating explanation in the Gemara in Sanhedrin. And after all, the Rebbe will come back to explain the pshat of this. So to understand the significance and the advantage that there is in people that are working, labor. So the Gemara tells us, Amar Rabbi Lazar. I believe. I have to look, maybe it's Amar Rabbi Acha, but I think it's Amar Rabbi Lazar. Kol Adam la'amal nivra. Every person is created to toil. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, ki Adam la'amal yulad. A human being is born to toil. But then the Gemara continues and says, Eini yodeya im la'amal pen nivra, im la'amal malacha nivra. What kind of a work, what kind of a toil is a person created for? Is he created to work with his mouth, speaking, the power of speech? Or is it labor, physical labor to work? Keshoaimer, there's a pasuk that says, Ki echav olav piu, that his mouth is pressing him. Which means that a person living in this world is pressed to use his mouth to conversation, to communicate. So this pasuk is teaching me that a person is created for the power of his words, to utilize that power to work, to communicate in conversation. That's the purpose of a person's creation. However, I could still have a doubt, what exactly does this mean? If a person is created to work with or to toil with his mouth, does that mean to toil with using his mouth and learning Torah, or using his mouth for conversation, for sicha? So the pasuk says, the sefer Torah should not move from your mouth. So from this we understand that a person is created in this world to toil in using his mouth to learn Torah. So we have 3 different ideas that the Gemara brings up, what it means when it says Adam la'amal yulad. In the beginning it suggests that perhaps a person is created to toil in physical labor. Then it says, no, we could see from the pasuk that it refers to toiling with your mouth. But then the Gemara says perhaps that means sicha, conversation. And then the Gemara concludes it refers to using your mouth to learn Torah. Let's not move on. So the question of this Gemara is, how could there even be a thought to say, as brias Adam is given la'amal malacha, that creation of man is for the purpose of toiling and labor? What's for amayla is da in amal malacha? What kind of an advantage is there that we would say this is the whole purpose? A person that is toiling in labor, was serecht zu sagen, that it would be possible to say, as silibdem is the ganze tachlis von seinem beschaffen werden, that this is the whole purpose of a person being created. Adam la'amal yulad, this is what he's created for, to work hard physically. How could that be the whole entire purpose of creation? Yeah, I mean, it's necessary for a person to work, to make a parnasa, an income, and so on. Definitely, it's a part of life. But to say that this is what a person is created for, the Gemara even has a doubt about this. How could the Gemara even say this? Al derech zeh is not move on. Also, the question here is the zweite gesalke daitach. The second idea the Gemara suggests, as der Adam is bashafen geworden zu liba mal sicha. Perhaps a person is created to toil with his mouth in conversation. What does this mean? A person is created in order to engage in conversation and communicate. That's the purpose of a person's creation, to use his mouth to speak, to communicate. Aber frat Leute wie der Rambam is meirich. The Rambam speaks at length about the various different things a person speaks about. As roiv diburim zenen gar diburim biltir itzuyim. Most of the things that a person speaks about are negative. There's only a small category of a person's speech which is positive, and a person should be sticking to that, which means he's going to end up speaking much less than he does. So how can we say that the whole entire purpose of a person is sicha, without specifying what kind of sicha, which would seem to be all-inclusive? A person should be living in this world with the purpose for conversation. What is that supposed to mean? Noch größer is ditmiyah. The question here is even greater. Lecha yedua. According to what it's known as is Torah. Even anything, a thought, an idea that's brought up just as an idea, of a suggestion, but it's not the final conclusion, is also part of Torah. So we can't say over here that the Gemara is bringing this up just by means of getting to the bottom line that it refers to Torah, but it is really absolutely no validity to the idea that a person is created to toil in labor or to toil in conversation. If the Gemara is bringing this up as an idea and it has a doubt about this in the beginning, it's part of Torah. As it's clear from the fact that when one learns just a question of Torah or an idea and a suggestion brought up in Torah, without seeing the answer or the conclusion, is a mechuyev to sagen birchas HaTorah. Before you learn this, you have the obligation to say birchas HaTorah, as it is before you learn anything in Torah, including a kasalka daitach, a question, because this is part of Torah. So how in Torah could there even be such an idea? You say to Mizu, furthermore, in der Brache sagt und ruft es an, Teirasai Teirasemes. When you say the bracha of Birchas HaTorah, we refer to it as to Hashem's Torah, the Torah of truth. So this heißt, if so, this has to mean, as in the Kashya, Kislakadaitach v'chulu, when you're learning a question or a Kislakadaitach, an idea in Torah, which is not the conclusion, is doa pratu svara mitis. There's an aspect of this, there's an idea here, which is actually true. Nada is nitzugepast. However, applying it here, it cannot be fully applied, and therefore it's refuted. But there has to be a point in this question or in this idea that was suggested that's absolutely true, and therefore it's referred to as Torah Semes. So how can we say that there's a kernel of truth or there's a point of truth in this concept that Amal Melacha is the purpose of creation or Amal Sicha is the purpose of creation? So al derech says moving binyanenu. So the Rabbi explains it and applies it. Over here we understand it in our case as well. Der teichen amayla was is da in amal malach and amal siche. Whatever content there is here, however we're going to explain the advantage that there is in the toil of labor or the toil of conversation or speech, was silibdem is da kesalkedaitach, as thus is the tachlis and brias adam, and therefore there is an idea to say that this is the purpose of creation of man. Wird nit abgefragt, this is not refuted, euch nach der maskanas haGemara as la'amal teire nivra. Even after the Gemara concludes that man is created to toil in teire, the suggestions before are not completely refuted. Says nar, however, what the Gemara is concluding is as amal melacha v'siche, the toil of labor and speech, sind nit genug zu sein der ganze Tachlis von Brias Adam. They're not sufficient to be the ultimate purpose of man. But they are a certain stage and a certain part of the purpose of the creation of man. Malacha, and then even more so Siche, and the ultimate purpose is Teire. In andere Werte, or to put this in different words, the Seder Anyanim from the Shakalavatari in Gemara, when you see the order of the discussion in the Gemara, which toil is the person created for, the Erste Kesalka Daitach, so the first suggestion, as La'ama Malachan Nibra, created to toil and labor. The Zweite Kesalka Daitach, then the second suggestion, as La'ama Sicha Nibra, a person's created to toil in conversation. Und the Maskana, as La'amal Teire Nivra, and then the conclusion that a person is created to toil in Teire, as the Pasuk says, La'yamish Sefa Teire Zemi Picha, is ausgehalten und bleibt euch lefi mahamaskana. This discussion in the Gemara and the three steps, the way the Gemara goes through this itself is the way it should be applied in real life. Which means, kidei, as the Adam zal zukommen, zu tachlis biriyasai, in order for a person to reach the ultimate purpose of his creation, which is la'amal teire nivra, that he has to toil in learning teire, muss er frier haben de meile von amal malacha und amal siche. You have to go through the steps exactly the way the Gemara suggests them. First, amal malacha, the toil and labor, then you rise to the next level, amal siche, and from there, and only after the two stages of Amal, Malacha, and Sicha do you come to the highest level, which is Amal Teire. When he takes the other two levels of toil, of Malacha and Sicha, and connects it now with his Teire, that is when a person will come to the ultimate fulfillment of the purpose of his creation. If it's just Amal Teire, not connected to Amal Malacha and Amal Siche, so then he's lacking in the full fulfillment of the purpose of creation. This itself, this process, the way it's discussed in the Gemara, this itself is also telling you what is the ultimate purpose of the Amal Teire, that it should be along with Amal Siche and Amal Malacha. So the question is, why is this so? I mean, Teire is above all else and has completely no relation to Malacha or Siche, seemingly. So why is it that the ultimate purpose of Mal Teire is fulfilled when it comes together with Amal Malach and Amal Siche? That we das verstehen, so this will be understood, by first explaining, in was besteht the chshivus von Amal Bechlal. Let's have a better understanding. What Bechlal is this whole premise here? What's this whole idea that the Gemara and the Pasuk tells us, Adam Amal Yulad, man is created to toil. What is the value in toil? That this is why man is created. This is so valuable that this is the entire purpose of a person's creation. Adam la'amal yulad. He's born for this. So seemingly we can ask the following question. If Hashem is the essence of good, the ultimate nature of goodness, so why did Hashem set up creation in such a manner as der Mensch soll darfen ankommen zu Amal v'yagia, that a person should constantly need to be relying on toiling and working hard, effort. This is the only way a person can be accomplished in this world. This is the only way that a person can fulfill his purpose in this world. That's the nature of things in this world. Why did Hashem create the world in such a way? What's the ultimate goodness? Seemingly the ultimate goodness is provide for every person the ultimate goodness of life without having to work hard for it. So now you can't answer and say the following. The reason why Hashem wants you to work for what you earn and accomplish. As this is the far was a mensch betivoi, because naturally a person has hot tainug beike von a Sach, was bekommt durch sein haravanya. When do you have true satisfaction and pleasure? It's when you gain and earn something that you worked on. This is understood from what the Gemara says. Person would rather have a smaller measure, one kav, of something that's his own, that he worked on, than a gift or something that 9 times as much, but it's not yours, it's something that your friend gives you. So this is human nature. So on the contrary, this is the ultimate goodness. You should feel the real satisfaction of life, that it's something that you earn. And that's why Hashem creates us with this drive and this nature of Adam lo amol yulad, in order to be able to achieve and feel the real satisfaction, the real goodness in this world. So we can't say this. This is not a valid answer, not a sufficient answer to explain why Hashem creates us this way. Varom ati teva gufe, this very nature is nit ken inyan achreichi mitzadatzme. This is nothing that must be this way. Not the Rabbi started as a might be given and mentioned. It's Hashem that created this feeling and nature in people, that people do not feel satisfied or don't feel a pleasure until it's something that they don't work on their own. If it's not yours, you don't feel the same satisfaction. Who created this nature? Hashem. His Hadar Koshile Dochte, so the question comes back. Was hat der Rebische beschaffen dem Menschen mit der Teva zu haben Tainug, Dafke von Sachen, was bekommt durch Amo wie Yegier in Yonitzar und nicht von Matnas Chinim. So why is it that Hashem created man in such a way that he only has satisfaction or pleasure from things that he has to toil and work hard on, and not from things that just come easy and for free, that Hashem should just grant us everything and we should feel the same real internal satisfaction just like we know of today when it's something that you work on, when you gain on your own. So the explanation, the answer for this is as follows. Amitius v'tachlis hatoiv, what's the real, genuine, and ultimate goodness? Is as der Mensch soll der gerechen. It's for a person to reach nit nur die hechste shleimus was is da in Geder an Evrayim. For a person to receive and have or rise to a level which is the highest level a person can come to within the framework of being a created human being. Naraich, but even more so, a madrege was in ihr verte kaviyachol daimele bayre. A person should come to a level where he becomes daimele bayre, godlike. He becomes similar to the Creator himself. Valderach Lashon Chazal, based on what the Gemara says, Shutef LaKadosh Baruch Hu b'Maaseh Bereishis, that we become partners with Hashem in creation. That's the ultimate goodness. Ultimate goodness is not goodness within the limits of creation, but goodness means to rise to the level, to be like a partner with Hashem. So therefore, at the Rebbe eingestellt is, say the Rabbi, so the Rebbe created the nature. In creation, as der Mensch sollen seine Bedürfnisse nicht bekommen min amucha, that a person should not receive his necessities all prepared for him. Not dafke durch amo wie yegier, something you have to toil and work hard for. Bichdei durch them, so then now that through this, soll sich aufheben, so now this elevates him, nit nur zu the shleimus von a mekabel kedeboy, that he's not only a recipient, as it would naturally be. A human being, a created being, is a recipient from the Creator that created him and provides him and gives him everything he needs. The shleimus von a nivra, which would be the ultimate level a person can come to when he's a full recipient, when he's fully open and he's a keli to receive from above, not oich to the madrege von a mashpia umahave, but actually to rise to a level where he becomes the giver. He is the provider. He is the one that's creating the goodness that he has. Similar to the position that the Creator himself is in, where the Eibishter creates and gives. By the fact that the necessities and things that a person has in life are things that he works on and creates for himself, by himself. Und das Gufe, so this itself explains, is the time of the Teva now. This is the reason why human nature is, as a Mensch, hat nicht kein Tainug von Sachen, was bekommt bechinnem. A person does not have pleasure, things that he gets for free. No adarabe, schämt sich damit. The Gemara actually says a person is embarrassed of this. Name de chsufe, this is called shame bread. Weil in dem Adam is mutba. It's very deeply ingrained in a human being, as ein Tafkod und Shleimus is, that his mission, his purpose in this world is to zayin nit nor a makabel, not only to be a recipient, nor echa mashpia, but also to be a giver. Similar to the Creator himself. Very powerful word that Rabbi is saying here. Simply, you would think the reason why a person that looks at things that he gets for free as Namid Chesufa comes from a selfish place. Because you think to yourself, this is not mine, I didn't accomplish this, someone else is giving it to me, I didn't accomplish this. So if there's less I in it, so there's less feeling of accomplishment here. But the Rebbe says, no, it's the exact opposite is true. The fact that you don't feel accomplishment or satisfaction in something that you didn't work on your own is because it's ingrained in you to want to be godlike. The purpose of your creation is ingrained in you to the extent that anything you receive as a gift, you never feel the same satisfaction, or sometimes even to the point to feel embarrassed, like it's something that you created, you provided, you brought this about, because then you're godlike. Unbelievable. The mitzvahs move on. Now with this we can understand, for was, the erste Kesokadaitach in Gemara is, as der Adam is bashafen geworden la'amal melacha. Why? The first suggestion the Gemara says is that when it says Adam la'amal yulad, what does this refer to? Amal malacha. Simply to work hard, to toil and labor, physical work in the world. Vibalt, as the mile of an amal, since the advantage of hard work is das was durch dem wird der Adam der Heuben zu der Darge von Mashpia. The idea here is to lift up a person, that he should come to the level to be a giver, like the Creator. A partner with Hashem in creation is mistaver. So the first idea that Gemara suggests is, it would be logical to say, as their amal dav zayin be'ikir, where, in what area does the toiling have to primarily be? Nit in inyanim v'zen shayach tziim un zaymadrege. So it shouldn't be in such matters that are related to the person and his level, who he is. The point of this toiling is not about yourself. Not in Zachen, was durch sie is mashpia in meiste bereishes, but rather in areas where here you can be giving and providing and contributing to creation. Daimim tzamei chai from Welt, to creation, to the elements of creation of Daimim tzamei chai that exist in the world that Hashem created, and then you become a partner. Dafke dermid veter hashupte b'meiste bereishes. Now you become a partner in those elements of creation. On the fast, so therefore, is the erste Kesokadaitach from Gemara. The first suggestion of the Gemara is, as Adam la'amal yulad meant, that a person is created to toil. What does this refer to? Nit amal siche, not toiling in conversation. Oder amal teire or teire. V'zeir inyan is nit in Weltsachen. Conversation or teire does not relate to creation, to matters in the world. Not as meant amal malacha, but rather it refers to amal malacha, to toiling in labor and physical labor, engaging with the physical elements of the world. Das heißt, durch dem, was der Adam is amal b'melachtai. This refers to the fact that a person works hard in his labor in an eifin harotzi al pi atayre. Of course, the main element of this is when a person works and engages with the world in the proper way, according to what Torah wants from him. But das is the pirish von amal malacha uked lekaman siv zayin. That's the real idea of amal malacha, not just simply the sweating of the labor, but also or primarily the fact that he's engaging with the world in a Torah manner. Is poyel umashpia and the bria, so through this he will have an impact and he will influence creation azizal zayin kedeboy, that the world should be the way it should be. It should be elevated to be appropriately according to Torah. Und der Ribber wird durch dem ashutiv b'maisa bereishis. This is where the person becomes a partner in maisa bereishis, in this element of creation, the daimim tzamei chai that he's engaging with in this amal malacha al pi Torah. That's the first idea of the Gemara, and that's the initial step, and that's what makes the most sense. Aber, however, from dem allein, as der inyan amal, however, in this idea here itself that we see, what's the point of this amal? What's the point that Hashem creates a person to work? Is bichdei der Adam soll werden as shutif la'kadosh baruch hu b'maisa bereishis. This is in order to elevate you to become a partner with Hashem in creation. Can we verstehen? So from this we can understand, as I cannot zukommen zu tachlis v'shleimus hashutvis, you cannot come to the ultimate level of partnership with Hashem durch amal malacha allein, through your toiling and labor. Now, muss haben dazu euch amal siche. You also have to add to this another level in your toiling, which is amal siche in conversation. So again, as the Rebbe said before, we're not negating the necessity of amal malacha. This is the nature of creation, that the necessities of a human being come through hard work, because that is a part of the fulfillment of the kavanah of becoming a shutev b'maise bereishis, the emphasis being on maise bereishis. But now, to understand how you can rise to being a partner, to becoming closer to a real partnership, sort of equal, in quotations, with Hashem, for that you're going to have to add a malsicha. Warum die Shutvus in maise bereishis is doch wenn is doimele beire. What does a partnership mean? Partnership means when you become godlike, you're similar to your creator. Und wie bald, as der Eibishter is nicht nur mashpia an der Bria. So since the Eibishter himself is not only a provider that adds and gives and contributes to creation, and that as machadish the Bria. Hashem is the one that created. He's machadish, he brings in something novel into creation, or by the very creation itself. Is move on, so it's understood as euch die Shutvus von dem Adam b'maise bereishis. So the partnership of the human being with Hashem in creation is a shleimus diker, will only be complete nar dan when poiled a chiddush in the bria. He has to be providing and adding something to the extent that we can say that the human being is bringing a chiddush, some new element in creation. So his hashpah has to be similar to the idea of hashpah the way it exists by Hashem, a hashpah that has an element of chiddush to it. And therefore is amal malacha alein et maspik. The toil and labor is not going to be sufficient. Hagam as durich malacha b'ifnei ratzoi, when a person toils and labor in the proper way according to Torah. Poil teran ilui in the bria, he's certainly elevating creation, so he adds, he contributes to creation. But that's not enough. Warum wie bald as der koyach hasiyah von amal malacha drückt sich nicht aus die meile von dem Adam legabe andere sugya bria. Over here, in your engaging in creation and working in creation, it does not necessarily express the unique contribution that only a human being could add to creation. Weil der koyach hasiyah is faran euch bei balichaim, because the power of action is not only a human power, but it's found by animals as well. So there's nothing novel about amal malacha that's uniquely human-like that you're adding to the world. A chiddush that you're bringing to the world that it doesn't have without you. Der Ribber tut euch auf dem Welt nor as a illui was is be'erech zu der Bria von Balei Chaim. So therefore, whatever you're contributing in the world by this amal malacha, you're only adding and elevating and designing and moving things around in the world, all be'erech, all within the framework of the existence of the world. But you're not contributing and adding something to the world of a different, completely different element of existence, something that's human, that's above the existence of the world. A chiddush in the bria, something novel that comes from the human being uniquely, higher than the world. When you take this amal malacha and then you connect it as well with amal sicha, the toil and conversation, is the malacha on hashpah and welt, as the malacha on hashpah and welt is in an oifen. So now you're toiling and you're providing and adding into the world is in such a manner was an drickt sich aus die meile von mina medaber pe vesicha. So here you're adding something novel to the world. You're adding to the world your power of conversation, your power of speech. That's the medaber, the human being that could converse. Demold werden die Brie aufgetan a chiddush a teisvis ilui. So this, you're not adding a chiddush, something new to the world. A teisvis ilui was es hecha von the Brie mitzadatzma, which the world does not contain on its own at all. Far the Brie is mina medaber mitziz shalai, before there's a human being and his entity that adds this element of peh v'sicha, it doesn't exist within the framework of the world itself. So here you're becoming a shutif, more similar to the way it is by the Eibishter himself, adding a certain chiddush into the world. That's the second idea the Gemara says. Das is aber euch nit kein emes richtige Shutfis. However, even this is not the ultimate level of partnership with Hashem. Hat nit kein Chelek in sein Beschaffung bechlal von sein Koyach hadibur befrat. You still do not have a part in creation in general, including also your power of speech, specifically that we're speaking about here in the second idea of what the person is adding in creation. But now when you take all of this and you connect it with toiling in Teire, it's Hashem's Teire, Creator's Teire. Hashem and His Teire are one and the same. And it's you, it's your toiling in the Teire. So now this Teire, which is Hashem's Teire, by you toiling in this Teire, it becomes your Teire. Now you accomplish something completely new in relation to the entire creation in general. You've now unified and brought together the whole entire creation with the creator of the world through the Torah that you're learning. It's through introducing and bringing Torah into the world that you now become similar to the creator himself. Because you're introducing into the world not only something new as far as the human being is concerned, your speech that you're bringing into the world, but you're bringing the Torah into the world and you're connecting the entire world to its creator. That's the ultimate shutfis that you could be as a giver into the world through learning Torah. But as we understand over here, each one of these stages is necessary, because if you're going to just have the Amal Torah itself and in all other areas, creation is what it is for itself and a person doesn't have to work for any of his necessities and it's just the Torah itself, so then that creation to the Daimon Tzemeach Chai, to the elements of Ma'aseh Bereishis would not happen. The point of here is to bring the emes of Torah, which is the Eibishter, Torah Sai, and connect it to the Amal Sicha and then to the Amal Malacha, to create it to the whole, to connect it, that is, to the entire creation, to the lowest elements of creation. So the stages of the Gemara is actually the explanation of how this works in life as well. To explain this Gemara on a deeper level, according to Chassidus, what the Gemara is talking about when it speaks about Amal Malacha, Amal Sicha, and Amal Torah. In the meaning from Amal Malacha and Amal Sicha, regarding explaining what this means, toil and labor, toil in speech or in conversation, is Kvekdushis Mari V'chomi Admor Mevayer. The Friedrich Rebbe explains in a Maimer. As Amal Malacha meant, what does Amal Malacha mean? Sheyase Malachtoi Be'emunah, that a person should do his work honestly. Sheyamim, which or what does Be'emunah here mean? He actually says different a little bit than honestly. Sheyamim Ba'Hashem. This actually means doing work with emunah, with your belief in Hashem. Shu hazanu amafarnes. That's Hashem. That's really the one providing for you. V'hu yizbarach yigmer ba'adel lebracha, and Hashem will help you finish whatever you have to, that it should be for a blessing. That's the idea of Amal Malacha, to bring Hashem into your Malacha. That it should be Malacha the way a Yid works, with the absolute emunah. Und der Inyan von Amal Sich is, what's the idea of toiling in conversation, is his askus betfillah. This refers to a person davening, occupying himself with davening. Or Kamayim Razal, as we see this in the Gemara, Ein Sicha Elet Tefillah. The expression of Sicha refers, like it says, what does this mean? To daven to Hashem. So toil in conversation doesn't just mean the power of speech, but it means davening. This explanation of the Friedrich Rebbe is the Yisaid from the Oibn de Mountain Beer. This is actually the premise for, or the foundation of the explanation before, as Amal Malacha is an inyan versus Be'erech zu de Bria, that the first suggestion of the Gemara, Amal Malacha, to toil and labor, is a person contributing and adding in creation through this, but he's adding something which is still within the framework of creation. When Amal Sicha is Hecha from the Bria. When a person toils in conversation, he's doing something novel, a chiddush. He's adding something to the Bria that's higher than what the Bria has for itself. And here, according to the Bria, the Friedrich Rebbe will understand this on a much deeper level. The idea of Amal Malach, which means a person going out into the world like a Yid goes into the world, with the Amunah and Hashem, everything he does in work, it's all with the ingrained with that Amunah that Hashem is providing for him here. This does not elevate the person or the world to a level, connecting to a level of godliness which is completely above the existence of creation. Warum? Since the very fact that this person has to go out and work and utilize the means of nature in order to make an income, nennt sich von den Medidis, Waagballes von Welt, is of course because of the limitations of the existence of the world. Und der Fall, so therefore, Agam, sein Amal Maloche ist durchgenommen, mit der Emunah ba Hashem, Shuhu Azanavam, Umbefarnes. So yes, his work is completely permeated with the Emunah that it's not just the nature of the world and his actions that is the source of his blessing, but it's the Eibishter that's really providing for him. Und nicht die Darke Ateva Mitzaratzum, not just nature. Von deswegen, but nevertheless, der Gerechte durch dem bloß so am Adrege in Elikos, was ist Melubischen Welt. He still is only connecting to a level of godliness relating to the world, because his emunah is in relation to his work in the world. That he believes that Hashem is here providing to him within the framework of his work that he's doing. So therefore this is a level of godliness related and enclosed and involved with the Metzias of the world. That's why through Amal Malacha, yes, you do introduce, you're bringing a level of a lakus into the world, but only a level that's be'erech, to the Metzias of the world. By contrast, when it comes to a Yid that davens, Amal Siche is in Yona. What's the idea of davening? It's like a ladder which is positioned on the ground and it extends all the way up to heavens. The hallah from Adam or to elevate a person from below to above. Bis magia shemaima, he reaches into heavens. This expression of shemaima means hecha from the bria, to go out of the limitations of creation. And the Rebbe, therefore, when zusammen mit Amal Malacha, went together with this, the toil of labor within the world, within the framework of creation, is euch da Amal Siche, the toiling and davening, tut men oif in the Bria teis vesili. This brings a tremendous elevation to the existence of the world. Hecher vizi is mitzad atzma, higher than the world is on its own, out of the limitations of the world. Was das ist der Teich von Sulam Mutzavarza, Veroishai Magia Shemaima. This is the idea of the ladder which is positioned on the ground and extends up to heaven. As durch Tfile is the Halah, when a Yid davens, what is he elevating? Nit nor von Adam HaMispala. The idea here is he's not only elevating himself in his davening, nor euch von die Inyanim Arziim, Arza, bis zu Shemaima. He elevates from the lowest level of Arzius, of earthliness, of the lowest elements of the world to the Eibishter. Zu der Beginne, was es Hecher vom Welt. To the level of Shemaima, bis zu Shemaima, which is to the levels of godliness, which is completely higher than the world. So the point over here is, if it was just the Amal Sicha alone, so then the idea of davening was just to elevate the person that's davening. But when the Amal Sicha comes along with the Amal Malacha, that this is a human being that lives in this world and engages with the world and toils and labor in the world, and that human being comes and davens and connects to Hashem, so he elevates all of his Amal Malacha, all of it, even that element of his life and of his existence and of the earthliness gets elevated to the Eibishter as well in his davening. So now we go to the conclusion of the Gemara. So although the davening of a Yid is poil Welt an ilu, was es heche von der Bria mitzadatzma, it elevates the world to a level which is higher than it is on its own. Von deswegen kann sich durch dem noch halt nicht aufgetan an emes chiddush in der Bria. Davening alone will not bring about a true chiddush, something which is completely otherworldly, completely above creation. Warum? The reason for this is, bald is the Allah durch Tfile is an anöfen as der Adam häupt sich auf bekoyach atzmai. Davening is something that comes from the person. It's his work, it's his investment and his involvement in the davening. Und is doch a mugbal. A human being, no matter what he does, is limited. Is euch sein aliyah b'medida v'agbala. So although yes, it says you reach to Shemaima, but who is reaching to Shemaima? The human being is reaching Shemaima, and therefore there has to be a limitation to this. Und der Rebbe wird durch dem aufgetanen Welt euch nor aza ilui, was es noch als be'erech habria. It still has somewhat a relation to the existence and the limitations of the world. You can't say that this is a real change and literally something completely new, unrelated to creation altogether. Was is dafke by an ilui shalei be'erech. This is only when you get elevated to a place which is totally out of range, completely unrelated to the place and the existence of the world. And that's where Torah comes in. Und der Far is the maskanas Gemara as la'amal Torah nivra. Therefore, the conclusion of the Gemara is human being is created to toil in Torah. Torah, Oich wie sie ist herabgekommen lamata, because the Torah, even after it descended here below, is the Torah Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It remains unchanged. The Torah of Hashem, which is bli gvul, completely unlimited. Und wie bald Torah is in ganzen Hecha von der Bria. So being that the Torah is completely higher than creation, that's what Torah is, and it's the Eibishter's Torah. Torah is not the creation of man's turning to Hashem, to daven with his own feelings and so on. Torah is Hashem's Torah. It's His Chachma, it's His Torah that's coming from above to below, and even when it descends here below, it remains completely and purely Hashem's Torah. The Rebbe hat sie de Koyach, therefore the Torah has the power to peil sein a shinui in the Metzias from Welt. It could completely elevate and totally change the world, bis sie soll werden a Metzias chadosha mamish, till to be able to completely and totally change the world to become a new entity. Torah completely can change the nature of the world. And that's the ultimate purpose of creation of man, to completely change the Metzias of the world. Aber, however, here we come back to the other point, but the Gemara doesn't go straight to the conclusion that man is created for the purpose to toil in Torah. The Gemara starts off with Hamal Malacha, then Hamal Sicha, and then it comes to Hamal Torah. Aber k'dei, man soll kennen durch Hamal Torah aufheben die Welt. So a Darge, was is in ganzen Hecher, chutz von der Bria, a Metzias Chadasha, in order to have this power, to elevate the world, to bring it to a level that's higher, outside, so to speak, of creation itself, to completely renew creation, muss frier sein, die Shleimus HaBirur, in die Hinyani HaOlam mitzad atzmam. You first must have the other two steps the Gemara speaks about, which is to fully refine the existence of the world within the framework of creation. Und der Rebbe is the Seder, as Samerschen darf sein Amal Malacha. Therefore, the order, the way the Gemara presents a person's Aveda in this world is first Amal Malacha, to toil and labor. The Isaskos in Inyania Eilam in an Eifen Haratzi al Piteira. Being involved in working in the world the way Torah demands it should be, as the Rebbe brought before from the Friedrich Rebbe Sicher, with the Amun and the Eibishter. Was durch dem is a Mesaken die Welt, sie soll sein ein Anzier von Kedusha. So by this he rectifies the world itself, that it should be in the proper form of holiness. Not going away from the world, but affecting the existence of the world itself. That's the first stage. Aber Amal Malacha allein is nicht maspik. But just the toil within labor in world itself, that's not sufficient. The kavana is, as Olam soll nicht bleiben, b'mamodei u'matzavai. The ultimate purpose is not that the world should remain within its condition of what it is. Afilin atzir from kedusha, including even when you add to it the amun and the eibishter, and you infuse in the world that level of godliness, of holiness, which is limited to the world. Then comes the next idea the Gemara says, the Amal Sicha, which refers to davening. Meile sein die Welt zu abchinnen elokos, was is hecha von Welt, to elevate the world to a place which is higher than the limitations of the world. As far as a person can reach with his own power, which is what davening is, durch avodas hatfilah. After a person does his utmost and this ultimate level of perfection that you come to through Amal Malacha, Amal Sicha, within the world, then kommt der Inyan von Amal Torah. Now comes the Amal Torah, was hatten sich der Koyach. What is the power of Amal Torah? Zayin Mushrish, and that's Musi is Barach. Torah, which is rooted within the very essence of Hashem Himself, so Eiftan Achidish in the Bria, to bring the very essence of Hashem into the world, which brings something completely novel and new into the world. Was durch dem wird durchgeführt die Kavanas Sabria, and this is what fulfills the ultimate purpose of creation, from Lasses Leizbarach Diribit Tachtainim, to create a dwelling for Hashem in this world below, as the Tachtainim werden am Metzias Chadasha Mamish, that the Tachtainim themselves, the lowest elements of creation, become completely renewed. In other words, if it would be without the introduction of Amal Malacha and Amal Sicha, so then drawing Torah into the world will just overpower the world. The world would not at all be a keli to say that the Tachtainim themselves get elevated into this new chiddush that we're bringing into the world. But only after you have the Amal Malacha and Amal Sicha, by elevating the world to its shleimus that a human being can bring the world to, then you continue with Amal Torah. Amal Torah brings atzmus into the world, and it actually reaches every single element of the Tachtainim themselves. Und damit is move on. So with this we understand as Dafke the Mitzias on the Seder von alle drei Sugi Amal. It's only when you have, and it's in this order of all three of these types of toiling, Amal Malacha, Amal Sicha, and Amal Teire, is Masber Umatem dem Inyu von Adam La'amal Yulad. This explains, and with this we could fully appreciate the idea of Adam La'amal Yulad, that man is created to toil. A person looks at his life, and the pasuk says Adam La'amal Yulad, and you see that this idea of Yulad actually exists in your life in many different parts of your life. It exists literally and physically when you have to work physical labor. It exists on a higher level when you toil to perfect yourself and to come closer to Hashem, to find your true identity and connecting to something higher than just the physical. And it exists in Torah. So the truth is we can see, and the Gemara is telling us all those aspects of toiling that you see in your life, it's all part of one goal and one purpose that it's coming to reach. Durch alle drei Sugi Amal, through all these three different types of toiling, tut oif der Adam a chiddush in Maise Bereishis. On one hand, it's a chiddush, it's atzmus, you're bringing Torah, but where are you bringing it into? Maise Bereishis, into the lowest elements of creation. Und wird durch dem ashutaf lakadosh baruch hu b'maise Bereishis. With this, you become a partner with Hashem in creation. Daimel lebayra, you become similar to Hashem Himself. Und das is the tachlis habriya. This is the purpose of creation. And as the Rabbi pointed out before, this is when a person feels the ultimate goodness in the world, when he fulfills his purpose of creation, or Hashem's intention in creation to create the Dira for the Eibush in the world. Now we come back to Eretz Yisrael. So just like this is true regarding a Yid's serving Hashem, the Eibush in this world in general. As a tachas von sein Bria is zu übermachen Welt. The purpose of creation is to transform the world durch Amal Teire, through the toil of Teire, was is hechel von der Bria, which is higher than the existence of creation. But in order to accomplish this, you must first have the steps of toil and labor, and toil and sicha, which refers to davening. The same is also true regarding Eretz Yisrael, which is the land of Yidden. Eretz Yisrael is früher gegeben geworden zu die Zayin Umas. Eretz Yisrael was first given to 7 nations. With the Kavana und Tachlis, but what's the purpose? As Yidden sollen ihr Koivish sein, the Yidden should conquer this land und Iber machen. The idea is that yes, it's going to belong to other nations, and it's going to be a place that's very low, but now you're going to transform this place. Von Eretz HaGoyim, from a land belonging to Goyim, soll werden an Eretz Yisrael and Eretz HaKodesh, that it should become the land of Yidden, a holy land. A land was in ihr is meir begilui der Eira Teire. A land where it's revealed, the light of Teire in this land. Was is Heche vom Welt, which is, as the Rebbe explained before, the idea of Teire is bringing a revelation of Hashem into the world, which is higher than the existence of the world. Und das hat sich angegeben b'mei Avram. This begins in the lifetime of Avram Avinu. That's when the process begins in transforming the Eretz, the land, Ibemachen. In other words, not just to introduce from above to below something higher into the land, but to actually transform the land itself. You got to elevate the Tachtaim. And this starts in the lifetime of Avram. Was dann is gewend die Eschale von Shnei Alofim Teire. As the Gemara tells us, this began the period of the 2,000 years related to bringing Torah into the world. On Avram, Hischel Lahar, the Medrash says Avram is the one that began illuminating the world. So Baleichten mit dem Eure Lekiv was his Hecher vom Welt. The Chiddush of Avram was, he introduced into the world a level of godliness that's higher than the limitations of the world. Und sein ist Beinenos, hat sich angegeben, and his contemplation, his realization of who Hashem is, began, Kemaim Chazal, as the Medrash describes, his Beinenos Kedebai. Avram Avinu contemplates properly on his level. Omal, meaning this is with toil, with hard work. Varum lo yagaito matzasa al tamen. Without hard work. If someone says he achieves without this, don't believe this. It's impossible. In the Bira Welt, the Noch, he looked into the world, into the Bira, palace, or the world, the Noch in Shemesh v'chulu, durch welche es kommt Shefa v'chulu in Welt. So he looks into the world and the sun and all the other powers of nature into the world, which through them you see the Ashpa coming into the world, these powers of nature that provide for the world. Bis as es ist gekommen, die Maskane as yesh balabayis lebirizu. And finally, he came to the conclusion that there must be a boss, a creator for this world. So he looked at the Bira, then he looked at the Shemesh, the Nacht, the Rebbe says afterwards he looks at the Shemesh of all the powers of nature, and this led him, in other words, the Rebbe is trying to point out, I think, that his Isbainanus was gradual, and with hard work, he went higher and higher. He began from the lowest. Again, the point over here is to transform and elevate from the lowest levels. So Avraham Avinu starts with looking simply, begashmis, at the physical world, at the Bira itself, and then looking higher than that into the powers of nature like the sun and the stars and all the natural forces in the world. And from there going higher and higher until he comes to the Eibishter himself, Yesh Balabayis L'Birazu. And then bis zu dem Einer Reich von dem Balabayis in the Bira, until he comes to understand who Hashem is. How infinitely greater than creation Hashem is. Totally Einer Reich, removed from this world he is. Kamayim Chazal, as Chazal tell us, interesting that Rebbe uses this term Mayim Chazal, this is the lashon that the Alter Rebbe says in Torah. Loi zehi ikra holocaust masha'elim is mishavim mimena v'chulu. This is not the primary existence of Hashem, the fact that He creates this world. So ultimately, Avraham Avinu came to the conclusion, not only yesh balabayis lebirizu, but this that Hashem created the world is not the true existence of Hashem. Hashem is way above this. So here the Rebbe is taking the whole point of the Sikha about the gradual steps of Amal Malacha, Amal Sikha, and then you come ultimately to Amal Teire. That's also the steps Avraham Avinu himself went through in his Bainanus Kidaboi, one step higher and higher, and it has to dafka go in this gradual way. If you want that ultimate level of understanding of the greatness of Hashem higher than the world should also impact the lower levels, should also relate back and elevate the simple and physical elements of existence. So now regarding the land of Eretz Yisrael itself, Kidei as the Eretz soll sein a Keli zum Eurat Teire von Avram was es Hecha von Welt, in order that the land should be a vessel for the revelation of Teire. Von Avram was his Hecha von Welt, the light of Torah that Avram brings, which is higher than the world. So you want the Oretz. The idea is to transform the Oretz itself, that it should be a keli for this revelation. Was durch dem wird in Nisapach werden und Eretz Yisrael Eretz HaKodesh, so the very land itself becomes Eretz Yisrael, or a holy land. Hatten dem früher gedacht sein der Inyan von Amal Malacha und Amal Sicha. So you first must have Amal Malacha, a place where there's toil and labor, physically in the world, and then Amal Sicha, and from there you can bring Amal Teire, and then the world itself will be a keli for this revelation of Amal Teire. So therefore, Dafke, das was die Yeshvi Aretz, seine gewähne Sukin benichische beidachole. The fact that he saw that the people in Eretz Yisrael are busy, are occupied, meaning they're working hard in the labor of the land, says dort gewend der Inyan von Amal Malacha. So you have there the first step of Amal Malacha is gewend the Achana. So then this was the preparation for the next step, as noch der Hakdame von Bakashas utfilas Avram Sicha. So now you have the next step, which is to bring davening into the world, to elevate the world to the next level. And this is here by the fact that Avraham Avinu davens and says, Halavai yehechelki be'eretz hazayis. He's davening to Hashem, I wish that my portion should be in this land. So Avraham Avinu is not simply davening and requesting something from Hashem, but he's actually taking what he sees, which is the first step of elevating the land, the Amal Malacha, and now introducing the next level of Amal Sicha, the davening. And then this is the introduction that brings to soll sein der Eretz gegeben werden, soll der Eretz gegeben werden to Avram or Lazare Achrav. Now this land will be granted to Avram and his descendants. For they haben es mahapach gewähnt zu sein an Eretz. They then could not transform this land itself, and welches leicht the Eira Teire, on which it's going to shine the light of Teire, was es Hecha von der Bria, which is completely higher than creation. So this is the explanation of the Rebbe over here, the significance of what Avraham Avinu sees, the Amal Malacha in the land. And therefore Hashem says, this is the place where I'm going to give your descendants the land to bring Torah into it, because dafka when you have the Amal Malacha and Amal Sicha, does the land itself become a keli for the light of Torah, not just to shine in this place, but to transform and elevate the land itself.